there, Chafin land. We are moving on to Germany from the Cold War to reunification. Let's talk about what that word reunification means today. So be sure that you have your guided notes and you have something to write with and you're ready to go because we are getting started. All right, so we got through World War II on our previous video. We need to talk about what happened after World War II with Germany. So after World War II, Germany was divided and occupied by the four powers. So it was divided into four parts. Each of those four parts was occupied by either the US, the UK, France, or the Soviet Union or the USSR. And this division of Germany was decided at something called the Potsdam Conference. So this map shows the divided Germany. So you see that Great Britain, you can see the flags there that show you who was occupying what area. So the blue area is Great Britain or the UK. The brown area was the Soviet Union or the USSR. The kind of gold area is the United States. And the green area, which you see there's a very narrow place there, is the area that France occupied. So this was again decided at something called the Potsdam Conference, and there were some terms at this conference. So some of these terms, not all of them, but some of them were that they were going to prosecute, they were going to put on trial all of the Nazi war criminals, anyone who was involved in war crimes. They had to reverse or undo all of the German annexations after 1937. So remember in the previous video we talked about to annex is to just say this is mine now. And Germany had done that with some areas, and anything that they had done after 1937, not when the war started in 1939, but anything from 1937 on, they had to undo. They had to stop claiming those areas. And they wanted destruction or control of all military potential. Remember that after World War I, the Treaty of Versailles said they had to reduce the size of their military. But after World War II, if they thought Germany was a brat after World War I, they were absolutely certain that they were criminals after World War II. So they said, you don't get any military. So you have to destroy everything that can be destroyed. So any tanks, any planes, any guns, etc. You have to destroy all of those things. And as for the people who are a part of the military, then those four powers, US, UK, USSR, and France, would take control of those. Now, they didn't just divide up Germany. They divided up Germany's capital city of Berlin, and it was divided into four parts just like Germany was. So this map, it's not easy to see. I'm going to show you a bigger one in just a minute, but that's Germany. That's what Germany was left with. And you can see again the four parts. They're different colors than we saw before. But deep in the middle of the Soviet Union's territory, you can see a little colored space, and that is Berlin. And we're going to look at that more closely. So again, this map is also all of Germany. And again, you can see the divisions, and it's the same colors on the smaller one. But what you see, you can see this a little bit better. And what you're seeing is you're seeing Berlin divided into just two parts. And we're going to talk about how that happened, because it was initially divided into the four parts. But pretty quickly, the US, the UK, and France, they banded together. And so it was just divided into two parts. So the Soviet Union had half of Berlin, and because it was in their territory, and the other three powers, US, UK, and France, had the other half. Political cartoon. So I want you to look at this. I want you to think about what the main idea is, this political cartoon. We're going to do a quick tacos strategy. So T is time. When do you think this is representing? So if we look at it, Again, you don't have probably enough background knowledge to understand this yet. Maybe you do, but we're going to assume that this was done shortly after World War II, or is representing the time shortly after World War II, during this time of Germany and Berlin being divided. A, action or activity. We have a cat. We'll talk more about the cat in a minute. We have a cat kind of tossing a mouse in the air. We have other mice down on the floor who are, I don't know, to me they look scared. I mean, but anyway, they're kind of cowering. C is captions or text. Now we get into the meat of this. So we have down here, we have 2 mice have words on them, and it says Western powers. So these down here would represent, I'm going to help you out, they would represent the US and the UK and France. So these are the Western powers. The other text is up here on the mouse that's being thrown up in the air, and it says Berliners. That just means people who live in Berlin. So Berliners being tossed in the air. He also looks scared, by the way. Objects. Oh. Again, we have these 3 mice on the floor. We have a mouse hole here. We have a mouse being tossed in the air. We have a cat that has a sort of a human-looking head, okay? This would be, you might recognize this. This would be Stalin. It's supposed to be representing Stalin. And so we can reasonably assume when we get to our so what summary, we can say that Stalin was... cat is representing the USSR, the Soviet Union. So we have the Western powers down here. We have the Berliners here. He's tossing in the air. I'm going to let you decide what is the main idea of this political cartoon. Put that in your notes. How were West and East Germany different? They were divided because pretty quickly after Berlin was divided and went from being in 4 parts to just 2 parts, Germany did as well. So West Germany became known as the Federal Republic of Germany, or the FRG, which was controlled by the US, the UK, and France. East Germany became the German Democratic Republic, wasn't democratic, and it was controlled by the USSR, the Soviet Union, with an authoritarian, they had total authority, and they had a communist government. All right, so you guys know about the Cold War, and unfortunately this image is about America in the Cold War, and we're not really talking about America in the Cold War. We're talking about Germany in the Cold War, but the Cold War lasted from 1945 to 1990, and it was a tension between democratic countries of the West and communist countries of the East. There were 2 major alliances. There was NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was the Western countries. And there was what was called the Warsaw Pact, which were the Eastern countries. Now again, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And on this map, you can see that the blue are the NATO countries, the red are the Warsaw Pact countries, and the yellow are non-alliance countries. They just weren't involved in either side. That does not mean that they were completely neutral, but that they tried to stay out of it. All right, so the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain was an imaginary or a metaphorical, you guys know about metaphors, divider between the Eastern and communist and Western or democratic countries of Europe. And there were restrictions about travel from one side to the other. So you can see in this map, there's a kind of a dividing line, kind of a boundary. It was imaginary. There wasn't a wall. There wasn't an actual iron curtain. Imagine that would be impossible to pull all that way across Europe. And it was not easy for people they could not go visit family or any of that sort of things on the opposite side, not easily. It was very, very, very hard. Mostly because the Soviet Union did not want people getting out. They did not want people leaving. And the democratic countries, the Western countries, they really wanted to get people out, but it was difficult. All right, so this is another political cartoon. This one is about the Iron Curtain. Again, I'm going to real quick tacos strategy with you, and then you're going to come up with the main idea. Time. We have to assume it's during the time of the Cold War that it's representing. A is action or activity. We have this guy running away from the wall. There's a person up here with a gun. This guy's taking a picture. These guys are just looking. This guy, we'll talk about who that might be in a minute, but he's trying to look under the curtain. There's not a lot of action going on over here. We do see a plane flying and we see factories burning stuff. Captions or text. It says no admittance by order of Joe. Over here it says Europe, so we see that the Iron Curtain is dividing Europe. This sign says to Russia. We don't really have any other captions or text. We do see a Russian flag, a Soviet flag. O is objects. So again, we have a sign, we have a train track that, kind of goes under there. We have people, we have some ruins back here. Again, we have shooters along the top of the curtain. And then we have over here, we have factories, a plane, we have lots of military looking materials, and it's very busy and everything over there. Again, we have this guy we have this curtain. You can see the curtain rod and the curtain rings. And we have somebody peeking under the curtain. He's smoking a cigar. You can think about who this might be. I'm pretty sure you can guess who that might be. And if you have trouble, I will tell you in just a minute. And so the summary or the so what. So that's what you're going to have to come up with as far as the main idea. I will tell you that Joe, you can probably figure that out. Joe would be Joseph Stalin. So nobody can come in. Joe says no. This guy peeking under the curtain, this is Winston Churchill. What do you think is the main idea of this cartoon? Now, something that was real and not imaginary. Remember, the Iron Curtain is an imaginary thing. It's an imaginary boundary. But something real was called the Berlin Wall. So the Berlin Wall was built to stop the migration of huge numbers of professionals and highly skilled workers from East Berlin to West Berlin. Again, East Berlin was controlled by the Soviet Union, and they wanted to keep those people in East Berlin, and they were trying to leave, and there was nothing to stop them. There was, again, an imaginary line for a while. And so literally overnight, they built a wall. East Germany claimed it was constructed as a border protection system. Where have we heard that before? And there were these checkpoints. There were places where you could get through at an eventual point. But so you see here it says Allied checkpoint, and it has, again, the US, the UK, and France. It says you are leaving the American sector. So you're leaving and you're going into the East Berlin area. There were very few of these, and they were very, very controlled. Some of you are very aware of the North Korea, South Korea situation. It's very similar. So they pretty much built this wall overnight. Now this is much later with what the wall looked like. Over here on what would be the left side of the picture, you see this huge area. This was kind of a no man's land on the East Berlin side. On the western side, you see there's a sidewalk right here. You can walk right up to the thing. People have done graffiti and all that stuff. And so it was a very different feeling on different sides. But again, they put the wall up. They started putting the wall up overnight. So people went to bed. They woke up the next morning. Some of them couldn't get to school. Some of them couldn't get to work. Some of them couldn't get to their family members. This is the wall being built in this picture. It was when it was completed, it was 96 miles long. There were 45,000 sections of reinforced concrete. So, pieces that were put together. Those were 12 feet high and 4 feet wide. And it was reinforced with fencing and barbed wire and anti-vehicle trenches because people on the eastern side would try, for instance, you saw that big wide area that I showed you before on their side, they would try to drive vehicles really fast toward the wall and knock part of it down so that they could get to the other side. And so they built these anti-vehicle trenches, which were literally like ditches that were V-shaped, so that if you tried to drive across there, your car would get caught and you wouldn't be able to do that. There were 116 watchtowers along the wall. So literal people on the wall, ready to shoot you. But they were mostly aimed at the eastern side. They didn't want anybody trying to get out. They were not so much trying to keep the Westerners away from that wall. And there were 20 bunkers. So this is from a book called The Shadow of the Victory. This is from chapter 7. It's by Viktor Suvorov. And so I just want you to listen. On August 13th, 1961, Berlin was cut in two by a concrete wall. The purpose of the wall? To hinder, to slow down or stop, the people of socialist East Germany from fleeing into the normal world. The wall was constantly perfected and strengthened, transformed from a normal wall into a system of impassable, couldn't get past it, technical hindrances of traps, elaborate signals, concrete shooting cells, watchtowers, anti-tank tetrahedrons, big wooden things wrapped around with barbed wire, and self-firing guns which killed the fugitives without the intervention of the border guards. But the more work, ingenuity, money, and steel the communists allocated to the further development of the wall, the clearer it became. Human beings can be kept in a communist society only by impenetrable obstructions, barbed wire, dogs, and by shooting in the back. Okay, so they're saying we can only keep people in communism by forcing them to stay, by keeping them from leaving. The wall meant that the system which the communists had built attracted no one. It repelled. Okay, so this is a satellite image, and what they have done, it doesn't show up this way, but remember it was 96 miles long, is that they have highlighted where the wall was. And you see it's not like a very straight thing. It went all kinds of wonky ways. And students always ask, well, couldn't they have just gone to the end and gone around? Well, again, they had people there ready to shoot you, so probably not. But the wall did come down. So this top left picture here is people standing on top of the wall and dancing. There was actually a concert that was done on the wall. Down below, we have this picture of Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev, in front of a piece of the wall. Again, we can see the graffiti on the wall. This is after the wall came down, this lower picture on the right. There's a famous quote from Ronald Reagan. The time came and communism had collapsed. It was not as powerful as it had been. And Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So the wall came down and both Berlin and Germany were reunified. They had reunification. They came back together. They were no longer divided in half, but there were terms for this reunification. The world still did not trust Germany, so Germany had to limit their armed forces. They could have them, but they had to be very limited. They could not manufacture or possess. They couldn't make or have nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons. And they had to accept the border made between Germany and Poland after 1945 because over the years, Germany kept trying to take over Poland. So they had to respect that boundary. And all the occupying forces, the US, the UK, France, even the Soviet Union, they left those areas. They left Germany in 1994. Now, the effects of reunification. So West Germany, the democratic part, they paid for most of the rebuilding of East Germany. They paid to help them because when the Soviet Union pulled out, they didn't leave a whole lot, and they didn't have industry and that sort of thing, and so they needed help. Now, the East German businesses, they struggled with competition because in a communist society, there is no competition. Remember, we've talked about that there is a shoe store, a bread store. There, you don't get to have competition among prices and that sort of thing. And so they struggled with that in the democratic world. And so many of those businesses failed. They fell apart. There was a 25% unemployment rate in parts of East Germany. And they had a few problems with unification. It was not, all roses and unicorns. After communism, East Germans had more freedom. Okay, they had not had any freedom, but they lost some things that they had really appreciated and enjoyed. They lost free childcare and medical care, and they no longer had job guarantees. They no longer, remember in communism, you're guaranteed to have a job. You don't get to pick what it is, but you're guaranteed to have a job, and they didn't have those guarantees anymore. And their living expenses were much higher. And West Germans had some problems as well, because they felt that the East Germans should be more appreciative of the help that they had given them. So Germany was together again. Now go back and review the video if you need to. Make sure you get all your notes. And always, always bring your questions to class, because I want to be sure that you understand. Please always remember and never forget, you are seen, you are known, you are cared for, and you are loved.